The price was always paid by the weak. Admiral Eva Rostova stood on the command deck of the TFS Resolute, the starlight of the Alara system a cold, indifferent witness. Before her, the main holotank rendered the scene in stark, tactical blues and reds. Her fleet, the 3rd Expeditionary, was a patient formation of blue icons, a line drawn in the void. Opposing them, the Varish Dominion fleet was a fist of jagged red, choking the system's primary trade lane. Between them, the emerald sphere of Alara 4 hung like a jewel on black velvet, a world held hostage. On every open channel, on every civilian display down on that planet, a clock was counting down. Its crimson digits burned behind Rostova's eyes. T-72 The ultimatum was simple, brutal, and characteristic of the Varish. Surrender. Governor Eris Thorne branded a traitor for harboring fugitives, or the orbital bombardment would commence. Rostova's orders were equally simple: prevent it. How she was meant to accomplish that against a numerically superior force without triggering a full-scale war was a question left to her discretion. The silence on the bridge was heavy, punctuated only by the soft hum of the life support systems and the whisper of cooling fans within the consoles. Every officer stood at their station, their focus absolute, the tension a low-grade vibration felt through the deck plates. Lyceum Rostova said, her voice calm and measured, cutting through the silence. Run the latest projection. The fleet mind's synthesized voice, a smooth and genderless cascade of pure logic, emanated from the air itself. The Varish adherence to ultimatum doctrine remains at a 99.7% probability. They will not deviate. They will fire. The current defensive posture gives Alara 4 a 17% chance of surviving the first wave with its primary infrastructure intact. A 17% chance was no chance at all. It was a guarantee of annihilation. Commander Jian Li, her tactical officer, shifted his weight, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of his console. Admiral A preemptive strike on their lead cruiser could disrupt their command structure. A decapitation run. The models show a window, however narrow. Rostova's eyes remained fixed on the holotank. A window that costs us lives and starts a war that kills millions. We are not them, Commander. We don't solve problems by creating graveyards. She saw the faint shimmer of the atmospheric shield around the planet, a fragile shell against the hammer poised to fall. She could almost smell the ozone of its strain, a scent of impending doom. Their arrogance would be their undoing. Sensors, she asked, turning her head slightly toward Lieutenant Anya Sharma's station. No change. Admiral Sharma reported, her voice tight. The Varish fleet holds its position. Their weapon ports are open. They are broadcasting the ultimatum on a repeating loop system-wide. The countdown is steady. The numbers ticked down each second, a stone dropping into a well of silence. 71 hours, 58 minutes. Rostova knew that time was not a luxury, but a weapon, and right now it was pointed directly at the heart of 4 million civilians who were guilty of nothing more than existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Her purpose was clear. She had to give them more time. She had to change the equation. A small, nearly invisible drone slipped from the Resolute's underbelly, a whisper of cold gas, its only propulsion. It was no larger than a fist, one of 10,000 just like it, a seed for a strategy the Varish would never anticipate. They believed only in the hammer. Humanity had mastered the shield, the key, and the hidden door. Rostova watched its icon crawl across the tactical display, a tiny blue spark of defiance. Before the grand maneuvers began, a quiet moment was observed. On a crew deck deep within the cruiser, Stalwart, a young engineer, helped his daughter with her homework via a private comms channel. She was on Alara 4, her face a pixelated image of childhood innocence framed by the harsh lighting of a public shelter. He patiently explained a math problem, his voice a calm anchor in her sea of fear while the ship around him vibrated with the silent thrum of pre-combat readiness. He knew his actions in the coming hours were the only variable that could change her fate. He promised he would call her back after his shift, a promise that felt both sacred and impossibly fragile. "Lyceum, confirm the decoy convoy is ready," Rostova commanded, her attention snapping back to the tactical void. "Convoy is green," the AI replied instantly. 5 repurposed freighters' shields reinforced drive signatures amplified. They are indistinguishable from military transports at this range. And the mirror lattice drones, deployed and awaiting activation, Lyceum confirmed. Calculated Varish sensor confusion index upon activation, 82%. They will see a fleet emerging from behind the moon. They will see what we want them to see. A ghost fleet, a diversion meant to pull their attention to test their discipline. This was the first lesson. Janli leaned forward, his focus sharp. They will fire on the decoys, Admiral. Their doctrine demands they engage any perceived threat during an active ultimatum. "I know," Rostova said softly. "Let them. Let everyone in this system see them shoot at ghosts. Let the record show who was eager to draw blood." She gestured to Sharma. "Lieutenant, I want our sensor network to record everything, but I also want you to piggyback their public broadcast. When they fire, I want the entire system to see their shells impacting empty space." The order was given. The 5 freighters, lumbering and slow, broke from their holding pattern behind Ilara's largest moon. They accelerated on a vector that would take them across the Varish blockade line, a blatant and suicidal run if they were what they appeared to be. The red icons of the Varish fleet stirred. Their formation tightened, a predator coiling its muscles. A ripple of energy signatures flared across Sharma's board. "They're painting the convoy with targeting locks," Sharma announced, the professional calm in her voice belying the tension of the moment. "Multiple sources. They are not hesitating." Rostova's jaw was set. "Activate the lattice, now." 100 ghosts were born in an instant. Across the void, 10,000 drones woke up. They did not generate their own signals, but caught the Varish sensor pings, amplified them, and bounced them back in a complex synchronized pattern. The Varish tactical displays, once clean and orderly, flooded with noise. Ghost signatures bloomed like algae, 100 false contacts for every real one. The 5 freighters were suddenly a fleet of 50, then 200, a swarm of blue icons charging their line. The Varish command ship, the Iron Will, was faced with an impossible choice: fire on everything, or risk letting a genuine threat slip through. "Their communications are a mess," Sharma reported, a thin smile touching her lips. "They're trying to sort the real from the reflected. It's chaos." The Varish chose the hammer. A volley of plasma bolts, brilliant white streaks against the black, erupted from their lead ships. They were not aimed at the real freighters, but at the densest cluster of ghost signals. On the public broadcast, now controlled by the Resolute, the citizens of Ilara 4th saw the Varish open fire on nothing at all. The plasma dissipated harmlessly in the void, a silent, furious tantrum. But even a blind predator is dangerous. A second Varish volley was tighter, more focused. A single Varish captain, perhaps a savvier one, ignored the sensor noise and targeted the most logical trajectory. One of the plasma bolts, astray from the main volley, screamed past the decoys and found the shields of a real freighter, the Stargazer. The ship's shields flared violently, a brilliant actinic flash. The holotank showed its icon flicker from blue to amber. "Report from the Stargazer," Jianli called out. "Shields buckled but holding. Minor plasma scoring along the port hull. No casualties, but their primary coolant loop has been compromised. They're venting." Rostova's expression hardened. The Varish had been willing to shoot even blindly. They had chosen violence when faced with confusion. The cost was minimal: a wounded ship, a rattled crew, but it was a cost nonetheless, and it had been paid by her people. A new line had been crossed. The ledger was now open. The account would be settled, Lyceum Rostova said, her voice dropping to a lower, colder register. I believe you have a new data point for your projections on Varish doctrine. Affirmative, Admiral. Probability of unprovoked escalation is now logged at 100%. They have proven their inflexibility. My recommendation matrix is updating. The AI's voice was as always neutral, yet Rostova could almost hear the weight of the new calculus behind it. Restraint had been met with aggression. A faint rhythmic pulse suddenly appeared on Sharma's sensor board, a ghost within the machine. Admiral, I'm picking up a strange signal. It's buried deep in the Varish comms chatter, a low-frequency broadcast emanating from their flagship. She worked her console filters, sliding into place. It's encrypted, but it's rhythmic, almost like a beacon. What is its purpose? Rostova asked, intrigued. A new variable was always a risk, but it could also be an opportunity. Unknown. It doesn't match any known Varish military protocol. It's too weak for command and control, too structured for jamming. Sharma shook her head, her brow furrowed in concentration. I need more time to isolate it. They were hiding something in plain sight. The decoy convoy. Its purpose served. Began a slow, deliberate retreat. Its phantom fleet dissolving as the mirror lattice drones powered down one by one. The Varish, having bloodied their nose on an illusion, did not pursue. They held their blockade, their arrogance dented, but their objective unchanged. The clock continued its remorseless descent, T-minus 68 hours, 14 minutes. The first lesson had been taught, but Rostova knew it hadn't been learned. The Varish only respected overwhelming force, so she would show them overwhelming clarity instead. Janshi said, turning to her tactical officer. Begin Phase 2. Move the asteroid emitters into position. Use the gas giant's magneto-tail as cover. I want them in place within 12 hours. Commander Lee's eyes lit with understanding. The inside-out strategy, Admiral. They expect us to try and break their cage from the outside, Rostova confirmed. We will instead teach them that their cage was never locked, that the walls were an illusion, and the real trap was the one they built in their own minds. She glanced at the timer. The first exchange had cost her time, resources, and a small measure of damage, but it had bought her something far more valuable: certainty. She now knew exactly who she was dealing with. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. The decrypted Varish message arrived 40 minutes later. Sharma's team had peeled it open layer by layer. It was not a military order, but a panicked internal report from a Varish intelligence agent. The fugitives on Alara 4 were not common criminals. They were Varish exogeneticists, a full research team that had defected with compromising data. The data detailed a catastrophic vulnerability in the Varish homeworld's food supply, a dependency on a single bioengineered crop, now showing signs of imminent collapse. They're not here to punish a governor, Admiral Sharma said, her voice hushed with the magnitude of the discovery. They're here to bury their biggest secret. The defectors, the data, they want it all erased. This ultimatum is the largest, most brutal cover-up in history. The pieces clicked into place. The disproportionate force, the inflexible ultimatum, the willingness to sterilize a planet. It was not about doctrine. It was about desperation. They were terrified. A desperate enemy is a predictable one. Lyceum Rostova ordered, a new, sharper edge to her voice. Recalculate Varish command psychology. Factor in extreme desperation and a mandate to conceal systemic failure at any cost. Recalculating, the AI responded. The holotank shimmered as countless new scenarios ran their course. New dominant behavior profile, cornered predator. The probability of them breaking formation to pursue a high-value target, even if it compromises their blockade, has increased to 67%. Rostova allowed herself a grim smile. Good. We will provide them with a target they cannot possibly ignore. She looked at Jian Li. I want a single ship, our fastest courier, stripped for speed. It will carry a data package, a fake one, of course, and it will make a run. Not away from the blockade, but deeper into the system toward the asteroid belt. They'll see it as the defectors trying to escape with the data Gian realized. They'll have to chase it. And they will walk right into our parlor. Rostova finished. The scent of ozone from the earlier shield impact seemed to linger in the recycled air, a reminder of the price of failure. The plan was no longer about survival. It was about judgment. Their doctrine was the cage. Their fear was the key. Deep in the station, orbiting Alara 4, a young technician monitored the civilian network. He saw the Varish propaganda, the repeated loop of Governor Thorne's face next to the word traitor. But now spliced between the loops was new footage. Grainy, unofficial footage showing a massive Varish volley of plasma fire impacting absolutely nothing. It was all over the network in minutes. Hope, he realized, didn't always feel like a sunrise. Sometimes it felt like a crack in a wall, a little bit of light getting through. The ship christened the Messenger was ready in 6 hours. It was a slender, dart-like vessel, its engines burning hot and clean. Rostova watched its icon on the holotank, a single spark of light, preparing to dance with dragons. In the asteroid belt, her other ships, cloaked and silent, had finished planting the emitters. They were now woven into the fabric of the system, an invisible web of technology and intent. The deck beneath her feet hummed with the quiet power of the Resolute's reactor, a steady, reassuring heartbeat. "Launch the Messenger," Rostova commanded. The little ship shot from the far side of Alara 4, a silver streak against the planet's green curve. It did not try to hide. Its drive signature was a bonfire, its transponder screaming a fake registry. It moved with the kind of frantic speed that suggested it was carrying precious cargo. The Varish have detected the Messenger, Sharma reported, her fingers flying across her console. They're hailing it, demanding its surrender. Let them hail, Rostova said. The Messenger will maintain radio silence. On the Varish bridge, Rostova knew this would be confirmation. The runners were not talking. They were guilty. The bait was being taken. Several red icons detached from the main blockade, their vectors converging on the tiny courier. Among them was the Varish flagship, the Iron Will. The cornered predator had chosen to leap. The trap was set. The door was about to close. The Varish ships, 3 cruisers and the flagship, tore after the Messenger with astonishing speed. They abandoned the rigid discipline of their blockade, their hunger for the prize overriding their tactical caution. They followed the courier into the fringes of the Alara system's main asteroid belt, a treacherous field of rock and ice. The rest of their fleet held its position, confident that a small squadron, led by their command ship, was more than enough. "They're in position," Jianli confirmed, his voice low and steady. "Emitters are standing by. The net is ready." Rostova watched the red icons push deeper into the field of gray specks that represented the asteroid belt. The Messenger, nimble and swift, weaved through the debris, leading them on a perfect chase. That strange signal from their flagship, Rostova asked Sharma. "Any more progress?" "I've isolated it," Admiral Sharma replied, her tone laced with disbelief. "It's not a beacon. It's a broadcast feed, pre-recorded. It appears to be a complete simulated recording of this battle." She brought it up on a secondary screen. It showed a fabricated space battle, Varish ships heroically destroying a fleet of Terran vessels over Alara 4, followed by a justified and precise orbital strike. They were planning to broadcast their victory before the first shot was even fired. The sheer cynical arrogance of it was breathtaking. The ultimatum was a sham. The countdown was political theater. They had come here to commit mass murder and broadcast a lie to justify it. Rostova felt a cold anger settle deep in her bones. Her arc of restraint was over. The time for righteous decisiveness had come. "This account will not be balanced. It will be paid in full." Lyceum, Rostova said, her voice like ice. Can we hijack that feed? Their broadcast protocol is archaic, the AI stated. It prioritizes signal strength over security. By activating the asteroid emitters and routing the signal through the dormant commercial relays, we can achieve signal dominance. We can replace their broadcast with our own. Rostova looked at the main holotank. The Varish chase squadron was now perfectly centered in the web she had laid. "Do it," she commanded. "Activate the emitters, reconfigure the mirror lattice, and take control of their broadcast. Show them the truth." A single command flashed from the Resolute. In the silent darkness of the asteroid belt, dozens of emitters sprang to life. They did not jam the Varish, but instead created a resonant feedback loop, turning the space between the asteroids into an echo chamber that mangled their short-range sensors. At the same moment, the mirror lattice drones, long since repositioned, activated in a new mode. They caught all the ambient energy in the sector, the drive wash from the Varish ships, the reflected starlight, the ship's own sensor pings, and focused it, not into a weapon, into a spotlight. Brace for the reckoning. A brilliant, concentrated beam of pure light, harmless but overwhelming, slammed into the bridge of the Iron Will. Every external sensor, every viewport was flooded with blinding white light. The Varish flagship was now deaf-dumb and blind. Its escort ships, suffering from the sensor chaos, found themselves disoriented and alone. Then, from behind the largest asteroids, Rostova's ships decloaked, not with guns blazing, but with every communication antenna broadcasting at full power. Across the entire Alara system, the Varish propaganda feed flickered and died. It was replaced by a live feed from the bridge of the TFS Resolute. The citizens of Alarath 4th, the Varish crews back at the blockade, the listening posts in neighboring systems, they all saw it. They saw the Varish chase squadron blinded and helpless. They saw the calm, disciplined encirclement by the Terran fleet. And overlaid on the screen for all to see was the Varish ultimatum, their countdown clock, and a window playing their own pre-recorded, fabricated victory footage. The humiliation was absolute. The trap was not a kill box. It was a courtroom, and the entire sector was the jury. Rostova had turned their own doctrine, their own arrogance, and their own lies into a weapon, and used it against them. The truth is the only weapon that leaves no scars. On the bridge of the Iron Will Varish, Admiral Kalen, his eyes shielded from the blinding glare, felt a rage that eclipsed all reason. He had been played. He had been exposed. His entire career, his species' reputation for martial invincibility, was being dismantled live on every screen in the system. His doctrine had no protocol for this. It had no response to being so thoroughly and publicly outmaneuvered without a shot being fired. "Fire!" he roared, his voice cracking with fury. "Fire on the Terran flagship's last known coordinates. A full volley. Annihilate them." His tactical officer hesitated. "Admiral, we are blind. We'd be firing at ghosts." "I gave you an order," Kalen bellowed. The order, born of pure vindictive rage, was obeyed. The Varish cruisers, firing without targeting locks, unleashed a salvo of plasma into the void. White-hot bolts of energy lanced through the asteroid field, a furious, indiscriminate barrage. They tore through empty space, through ice clouds, through shattered rock, and directly into the path of the Resolute. Incoming, Jian Li shouted, his hand instinctively going to the collision alarm. Multiple impacts predicted in 5, 4. The bridge lights flickered as the ship's shields drew immense power, the hum of the deck plates rising to a scream. Lyceum's voice cut through the rising chaos, a sliver of pure data in a moment of visceral terror. Probability of shield integrity failure, 43%. Probability of hull breach, 28%. Brace for kinetic impact. Rostova stood motionless before the holotank. She did not flinch. She did not look away. She watched the streaks of incandescent fury converge on her ship, her face a mask of calm, resolute steel. This was the final, desperate act of a failed doctrine. The last tantrum of a bully who had been called to account. She had shown them the cost of their choices. Now she would endure it. They would learn what it means to be resolute. The first plasma bolt struck the forward shields. The world outside the viewports dissolved into a searing wall of white light. The entire ship shuddered a deep, groaning tremor that threw officers from their feet and sent cascades of sparks down from the ceiling conduits. Red alert klaxons blared a shrieking counterpoint to the thunderous roar of the impact. The deck buckled under Rostova's boots, the vibration traveling straight up her spine. Another bolt hit, then a third, a rapid, brutal percussion that felt like the fist of a vengeful god hammering on the hull. "Shields at 30%, Janley yelled, pulling himself back up by his console. "We can't take another hit like that." "Engineering report." Rostova commanded, her voice cutting through the noise, a point of absolute authority in the chaos. The cool, recycled air now carried the acrid scent of burned wiring and superheated metal. The reply came back strained and distorted. "Warp core is stable, but the primary shield emitters on decks 7 through 9 are offline. We're bleeding power, rerouting everything we have to the forward projectors." Anya Sharma's station exploded in a shower of sparks, and she cried out, clutching her arm. A medic rushed to her side. Even through the filters, the glare from the repeated impacts was blinding, forcing the crew to shield their eyes from their own displays. The ship groaned again, a long, tortured sound of stressed metal. The cost of victory was being tallied in real time in scorched plating and wounded crew. There is always a price for standing your ground, but the Resolute held. The final plasma bolt dissipated across its flickering, failing shields. The barrage was over. The Varish, having spent their fury, were now exposed and disarmed, their weapons' capacitors drained. Silence descended on the bridge, a ringing, hollow quiet, broken only by the hiss of a ruptured coolant line and the pained gasps of the injured. Rostova stood firm, her hand gripping the edge of the holotank to steady herself. Her ship was wounded, her people were hurt, but they were alive. "Status of the Varish squadron," she asked, her voice raspy. A backup tactical display flickered to life. "They are holding position," Admiral Jian Li reported, his face smudged with soot. "Their heat signatures are off the charts. They've exhausted their primary weapon reserves. They are silent." The broadcast feed was still live. The entire sector had just witnessed the Varish flagship, blinded and disgraced, firing in a fit of impotent rage. They had seen the Terran vessel endure the assault without retaliation. Rostova had made her point. She had held up a mirror, and the Varish had shattered it with their own reflection. "A mirror shattered is 1,000 witnesses. Open a channel to the Iron Will," Rostova ordered. "All system channels. Audio only." A moment passed, then the comms officer nodded. "Channel is open, Admiral." Rostova drew a slow breath, the metallic taste of the air coating her tongue. She did not speak to Admiral Kalin. She spoke to everyone. "This is Admiral Eva Rostova of the Terran Fleet. You have just witnessed the failure of the ultimatum doctrine. It is a tool of fear wielded by those who lack the courage for reason. It is a demand for surrender from those who have already surrendered to their own worst impulses." Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of conviction. "We did not fire a single shot. We did not take a single life. We simply showed you the truth. The Varish came here to hide a failing, and they were willing to burn a world to do it. They have answered our restraint with violence. They have answered our clarity with rage." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "The ledger is now clear. The choice is yours. The countdown clock on Alara 4 is a lie. The only countdown that matters now is the one before the rest of the galaxy judges you for your actions here today. The universe is a big place to be alone." The response, "Mo," was not immediate. For a full minute, the system held its breath. The Varish ships floated steaming and silent, caught in the unbreakable web of their own Alamamsum public disgrace. Then a new icon appeared on the tactical display. A single Varish destroyer, one of the ships from the main blockade, turned. It did not power its weapons. It retracted them. Then another ship followed its lead. And another. Admiral Sharma said, her voice filled with awe. The blockade. I think it's breaking. Within the Varish fleet, a schism was occurring. Captains who had watched the debacle, who had seen their admiral's dishonor, were making a choice. They were refusing to be party to it any longer. The rigid monolithic structure of the Varish dominion was cracking right here in the light of a truth it could not extinguish. Admiral Kalin on his darkened and silent bridge must have seen it too. His fleet was fracturing. His authority was gone. His legacy was a single act of blind recorded rage. His ultimatum had failed, and in doing so had cost him everything. They came to issue a demand. They left with a verdict. Lyceum Rostova said softly. Cancel the red alert. Send medical teams to all damaged decks. And get me a full damage report. The immediate crisis was over, but the consequences were just beginning. The Resolute was scarred. Her crew would carry the memory of the impacts, the scent of the fire, the vibration of a ship on the brink. These were the entries on the other side of the ledger, the price for a victory won without firing a gun. The Varish flagship, the Iron Will, finally moved. It did not try to fight. It did not try to run. It simply turned slowly and deliberately and began to limp away, its escorts following like chastened children. They were retreating. The remaining ships of the blockade hesitated for a moment longer, then began to follow suit, their powerful engines igniting to carry them away from the system they had failed to break. The countdown clock on Alara 4 vanished from the public channels, replaced by the seal of the Terran Federation. The hostage was free. The crisis was over, but Rostova knew this was not an ending. It was a beginning. A precedent had been set. A doctrine had been broken on the anvil of public opinion. The Varish would have to answer for what they had done, not to her, but to the rest of the galaxy that had been watching. Her gaze drifted to the emerald world of Alara 4, now safe beneath the silent vigil of her fleet. The people down there were not just survivors, they were witnesses. They were the living proof that tyranny's greatest weakness is a steady hand. A junior officer, his face pale but his eyes shining, approached her. Admiral O. A message from the governor of Alara IV. He wishes to thank you. He says all of humanity thanks you. Rostova nodded, a faint, weary smile touching her lips. We held the line, Lieutenant. That's what we do. She looked at the holotank, at the retreating red icons of the Varish fleet. They were not just leaving Alara. They were leaving behind the shattered pieces of their own invincibility. And her fleet, battered but unbroken, would remain to ensure they did not forget the lesson they had been taught. A lesson written not in blood, but in light. A lesson about the true accounting of power. The immediate aftermath was a symphony of controlled chaos. Damage control teams moved with practiced urgency, their voices a calm, steady litany of reports over the internal comms. The sharp, acrid smell of ozone and burnt insulation hung heavy in the air, a ghost of the Varish's final futile rage. On the bridge, the tension broke, not with a cheer, but with a collective shuddering exhalation of breath. Medics were tending to Lieutenant Sharma's arm, a minor burn from her console overload, while engineers worked to bypass the fried circuits. The ship was alive, but it was wounded. Jan Lee stood beside Rostova, his gaze fixed on the damage reports scrolling across a secondary screen. Deck 7 has atmospheric containment, he said, his voice low. But 3 primary conduits are fused. We've lost 60% of our forward sensor resolution. Life support is holding steady, but we're running on secondary systems. Lyceum's projections suggest we'll need 3 weeks of yard time to be fully operational. The cost was steep, a litany of repairs and resource drains. We paid the price, Gian Rostova replied, her eyes never leaving the holotank, where the last of the Varish icons were vanishing into the void of interstellar space. But we chose the currency. That makes all the difference. She could feel the deep, resonant thrum of the Resolute's engines through the soles of her boots, a labored but unbroken rhythm. A new day had been bought, but the night was not yet over. Down on Alara 4, the lifting of the Varish threat was met with a stunned silence, followed by an explosion of joy. In the shelters, strangers embraced. On the streets, people looked up at the sky not with fear, but with a renewed sense of wonder, their eyes searching for the tiny, distant glint of the ships that had stood between them and annihilation. The fabricated Varish propaganda was gone, replaced by endless replays of the Terran fleet holding its ground, enduring the fire, and winning without a single act of aggression. They had been given a lesson in a new kind of power. Rostova ordered the fleet to a new defensive posture, a loose cordon around Alara 4, more a watchtower than a cage. Her ships were damaged, her crews exhausted. A quiet vigil settled over the system. The immediate threat was gone, but the Varish were still out there, a wounded and unpredictable animal. Lyceum, Rostova said into the quiet of the bridge. Analyze their retreat vector. Are they leaving the sector? Negative, Admiral. The AI responded, its voice a cool stream of data. The Varish fleet has ceased its retreat at the system's heliopause. They are regrouping. Their energy signatures suggest they are not preparing for a jump, but for a protracted stay. Furthermore, a new vessel has just translated from hyperspace and is joining their formation. A single new icon appeared on the edge of the holotank, colored a neutral violet. It was smaller than the warship's, its energy signature, strange and complex. It does not match any known Varish military design, Sharma reported, her arm now in a light medical brace. It's broadcasting a standard civilian transponder code, but the power output from its core is disproportionately high. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing. Fear had failed them. Now came the rattlesnake. The mysterious vessel did not hail the Terran fleet. Instead, it began a tight, repeating broadcast on a deeply encrypted, unusual frequency. It was not a communication meant for Rostova. It was a signal aimed directly at the planet below. A nagging sense of unease settled over Rostova. This was not the act of a defeated foe. This was a new move in a game she thought she had already won. What is it saying, Sharma? Working on it, Admiral. The encryption is layered. It's not military, it's biological data encoding, almost like a string of genetic code. The mystery deepened, a shadow falling over their victory. It's taking Lyceum time to parse the context. While the AI worked, Rostova connected with Governor Thorne on Alara 4. The man's face, etched with the strain of the past 72 hours, was now filled with a profound gratitude. He also brought news of the Varish defectors. The science team, now safe under his protection, had been monitoring the Varish fleet's communications. Admiral Thorne said, his voice heavy. Dr. Ilara Vance, the lead exogeneticist, she recognized the broadcast protocol. She says it's a genetic fail-safe key, a dead man's switch for their entire civilization. Their ultimatum had always been a lie. This one was real. The pieces snapped into place with sickening clarity. Rostova turned back to her command crew, her face grim. The Varish leadership is desperate. They couldn't bury their secret, so now they're going to burn the evidence, even if the evidence is their own homeworld. Janley stared at her, his mind racing to catch up. You mean they'd trigger the food supply collapse themselves? Precisely, Rostova confirmed. They will engineer a famine and blame it on the defectors and on us for harboring them. They'll turn their greatest shame into a rallying cry, a martyr's cause. They are threatening to kill their own people to win a political argument. This was an escalation beyond anything she had anticipated. Her conflict triangle had shattered and reformed into something monstrous. Her moral line was no longer about preventing a war. It was about preventing a genocide. Lyceum's purely logical calculus would argue for containing the fallout. The Varish doctrine had turned inward, becoming a weapon of suicidal blackmail. Their pride demanded a graveyard, even if it was their own. Lyceum's voice filled the bridge, calm and chillingly precise. Dr. Vance's hypothesis is confirmed. The broadcast is an activation sequence. If completed, it will trigger an accelerated protein breakdown in the Varish primary crop, Kalen's folly. The result will be a complete agricultural collapse within 3 standard years. My projections indicate a 92% probability of Varish civilization collapse, resulting in a refugee crisis that will destabilize this entire galactic quadrant for decades. The AI paused, then delivered its cold, logical conclusion. The most effective course of action to prevent this outcome is to neutralize the Varish command structure. A targeted strike on Admiral Kalen's flagship and the new vessel would decapitate their leadership and prevent the signal's completion. Probability of success, 81%. Probability of this action, initiating a state of total war, 100%. The choice was laid bare. Start a war to save a people from their own leaders. Rostova rejected it instantly. We will not become them to stop them. There has to be another way. She paced the bridge, the deck humming beneath her feet. They couldn't attack. They couldn't stand by. They had to change the game again. The Varish people don't know, she said, thinking aloud. They're civilians, they're regular soldiers. They don't know their leaders are willing to starve them. If we could tell them, if we could give them the truth. A plan began to form, not of battle, but of insurrection. Commander Lee, she ordered. I want a stealth team, 3 of our best. They're not going to a warship. Find me the nearest civilian Varish outpost in this sector. Lee's fingers flew across his console. There's a commercial trade hub, Kalen's Pride, on the edge of the system. It's a major communications node for their civilian network. But it's deep in their territory, Admiral. Even with stealth, the risk is extreme. The risk of doing nothing is greater, Rostova countered. Their mission is simple. Infiltrate the hub, access their civilian comms network, and upload everything. The defectors' data, the cure, they've been working on a full, unedited recording of everything that has happened in this system. We are going to give the Varish people the truth and the tools to save themselves. She looked at Lyceum's impassive icon. The greatest weapon is not a missile. It is a choice. The ledger must be shown to those who are forced to pay the debt. Before committing to the dangerous new plan, Rostova insisted on a brief period of quiet readiness. In the medical bay of the Stalwart, the same engineer who had been helping his daughter with her homework now sat by the bedside of a crewmate who had been outward during the Varish barrage. He shared a drink pouch with her, the silence between them filled with the quiet beeping of medical monitors and the low hum of the ship. They didn't speak of the battle, but of home. His compassion was a quiet, potent reminder of what they were fighting to protect, not just lives, but the very grace of which life was capable. The stealth ship, the Whisper, detached from the Resolute 12 hours later. It was a sliver of black against the endless dark, its hull coated in sensor-absorbent plating, its heat signature almost non-existent. On board was Lieutenant Commander Eva's most trusted intelligence officer, Kalen, and his small team. Their task was to thread a needle through the regrouped Varish fleet and reach the trade hub undetected. The entire operation hinged on their success. Rostova and her command staff watched from the Resolute's bridge as the Whisper's icon crept across the holotank. The ship was a ghost, a prayer sent into the darkness. The tension on the bridge was a palpable thing, thicker than it had been during the blockade. Then they had faced an enemy they could see. Now they were fighting an idea, a lie, and their only weapon was a fragile sliver of truth. Their silence was a shield, their mission a spear. "The Whisper has passed the outer picket line," Sharma reported, her voice barely a whisper itself. "So far undetected. They're running on pure battery power. Life support is at minimum." Hours crawled by. The Varish continued their cryptic broadcast, each repeating cycle another step toward planetary starvation. Rostova could feel the seconds ticking away, a countdown far more menacing than the one they had faced before. She drank bitter, lukewarm coffee, the synthetic taste a familiar anchor in the long, quiet wait. The ship around her was a web of hushed activity, repair crews working silently, bridge officers monitoring their screens with unwavering focus. A sudden flare on the tactical display made everyone jump. One of the Varish cruisers had changed its patrol vector, its path now set to intercept the Whisper. "They've seen them," Lee breathed, his knuckles white. No Lyceum countered instantly. "That is a standard random patrol vector. The probability that they have detected the Whisper is less than 1%. However, their new course will bring them within passive sensor range in 12 minutes. 12 minutes. The Whisper was too deep to turn back too far, to accelerate without revealing its position. They were caught. A single unlucky chance can undo the most perfect plan. Rostova's mind raced. They couldn't communicate with the Whispers without breaking radio silence and giving them away. They were on their own. She looked at the holotank, at the approaching icons, one predator, one prey. But then she saw something else. A third element. A cluster of dense ice asteroids, part of the system's outer debris field. It was near the intercept point. "Lyceum," she said, her voice sharp. "Calculate the resonant frequency of those ice asteroids. Can we create a focused sensor ghost using a tight beam transmission from here?" "The distance is extreme," the AI replied. "The signal would be weak. But by bouncing it off a communications satellite, we could create a momentary sensor reflection. A ghost. It would last less than 5 seconds, but it might draw their attention." "Do it," Rostova ordered. "Time it for precisely 1 minute before they enter passive range of the Whisper. Give them a different ghost to chase. A focused lie can reveal a greater truth. A single needle-thin beam of energy shot from the Resolute, invisible and silent. It traveled for millions of kilometers, struck a dormant comms relay, and ricocheted toward the ice cluster. For a few brief seconds, the Varish cruiser's sensors picked up a phantom energy signature, a false reading that looked like a decloaking ship. The Varish cruiser reacted instantly. It changed course again, accelerating toward the ghost signal, its attention diverted. The Whisper, safe in the cruiser's sensor shadow, slipped past the near miss, a silent scream in the void. On the Resolute's bridge, a collective sigh of relief was released. "They're clear," Sharma confirmed, her shoulders slumping. "The Whisper has passed the patrol. They're approaching the trade hub." The second phase of the plan was now in motion. The first had been a public spectacle. This one was a secret, a conspiracy of hope. The team had to physically access a terminal, to slice through Varish security, and to plant a seed of truth in the heart of their enemy's civilian network. They came to hold a line. They stayed to break a chain. The trade hub. Kalen's pride was a glittering jewel of commerce and civilian life. It was a stark chaos contrast to the grim warships that surrounded it. The Whisper docked at a remote automated maintenance port, disguised as a cargo drone. The team, clad in environmental suits that mimicked Varish civilian models, disembarked into the station's labyrinthine corridors. They had 45 minutes. Rostova could only watch a single static icon on her display. There would be no communication, no updates until the mission was complete or had failed. The waiting was a unique form of torture. She found her gaze drifting to the main viewport, to the cold, distant stars. Each one was a system, a world potentially, with its own struggles, its own ultimatums. The galaxy was a vast, complex machine, and she was just one small lever. But sometimes a single lever could move the world. A sudden alarm blared from Sharma's console. "Admiral, the Varish broadcast has changed. The sequence is accelerating." "They know," Lee said, his voice grim. Someone tipped them off. "The mission is compromised." No Lyceum stated its logic, cutting through the panic. "My analysis suggests this is not a reaction. This is the final stage of the activation key. They were always going to accelerate it at the end. The failsafe will be fully active in 27 minutes. The clock was ticking again, faster than ever. The infiltration was now a desperate race. On the trade hub, the team must have seen the same alerts. They would know that their time had just been cut in half. A reckoning cannot be delayed. It can only be met. Inside Kalen's Pride, Commander Kalen's team reached the central communications nexus. The air hummed with the flow of data, a river of information for an entire species. They bypassed the first layer of security with ease, but the core system was protected by something they hadn't expected, a biological lock keyed to Varish DNA. They were stuck. With the clock ticking down, Kalen made a command decision. They couldn't break the lock, so they would bypass it entirely. They attached a device to the main data conduit, a high-speed data shunt. It was crude, a brute force attack that would be detected almost instantly, but it would be fast. They initiated the upload. For a few glorious minutes, it worked. The data flooded the Varish civilian network. The truth about their government's lies, the cure for the famine, the full, unedited footage of the Resolute, enduring the Varish admiral's blind rage. A message of hope and a call to reason sent directly to the people. Then the alarms screamed. The station's security forces were alerted. The team had to fight their way out. The truth had been planted. Now came the harvest. On the Resolute, they saw the data bloom across the Varish network before they saw the station's internal security alerts flare to life. They did it! Sharma cried out. The upload is complete, but their victory was short-lived. The icon for the whisper began to flash red. "They're taking fire," Lee reported. "The station's defenses are active. They're trying to get clear, but they're pinned down." Rostova's jaw was tight. She had sent them in. She had to get them out. "Jian, what is the fastest ship we have?" "The messenger," he replied instantly. "The courier from the first trap. It's stripped down and built for speed." "Get it ready," she commanded. "Send it in. Not as a warship, but as a rescue mission. Broadcast on all civilian channels. Terran medical vessel en route to render aid at Kalen's Pride trade hub responding to internal explosion. We're going in the front door." It was an audacious, insane gamble. A lie so bold it might just be believed. The best deception is one wrapped in compassion. The messenger launched its transponder, screaming its peaceful intent. It raced toward the trade hub, a single tiny ship on a mission of mercy. The Varish fleet, thrown into confusion by the data uprising on their civilian channels, hesitated. Orders were shouted, rescinded, and countermanded. Their rigid command structure was failing. Some ships moved to intercept the messenger. Others held their position, their captains likely staring in disbelief at the data now flooding their own private screens. The Varish fleet was at war with itself. On one cruiser, a young captain, his heart filled with the shame of his admiral's actions and the horror of his government's plan, made a choice. He saw the small Terran medical ship. He saw the internal security alerts from the civilian hub. And he saw the data stream that proved his leaders were willing to murder their own people. He swung his warship around, not to fire on the messenger, but to shield it, placing his own vessel between the rescue ship and his loyalist comrades. A single act of conscience can turn the tide of history. That was the spark. Another ship followed his lead, then another. The Varish fleet, the monolithic fist of the Dominion, shattered into pieces. A civil war erupted in the silent void of space. Brother against brother, ship against ship. Loyalist vessels still following the orders of a disgraced admiral, opened fire on the mutineers who were trying to protect the Terran rescue mission. Rostova watched in stunned silence as her gambit, her desperate attempt to spread the truth, had ignited a fire she could not control. Her fleet was no longer facing an enemy. They were now the sole arbiters of a civilization tearing itself apart. "Bring the fleet to battle readiness," she ordered, her voice heavy with the weight of the moment. "But we are not engaging. Our role has changed. We are now peacekeepers. Move us in. Separate the factions. Enforce a ceasefire. Lyceum broadcast our intention on all channels. We will fire on any ship from either side that continues to engage." They had come to withstand a siege, and now they must command a peace. The Terran Third Expeditionary, battered and bruised, moved with a new and solemn purpose. They positioned themselves between the warring Varish factions, their shields up their weapon ports, open but silent. They were a wall of resolute calm in a sea of chaos. The sheer disciplined presence of the Terran fleet, the very fleet they had tried to break, had a sobering effect. The fighting faltered, then stopped. The messenger reached the trade hub, recovered the extraction team amidst the confusion, and retreated under the protective shield of the mutineers. The fail-safe signal from the Varish command ship sputtered and died, its purpose lost in the collapse of its authority. The Varish civil war fought in the Alara system was over in less than an hour. The mutineers, representing the vast majority of the fleet, surrounded the Iron Will and the few ships still loyal to Admiral Kalen. His reign was over. His doctrine was dead. A new Varish captain, the one who had first moved to shield the messenger, opened a channel to the Resolute. His face was young, his eyes filled with a terrible sadness and a firm resolve. "Admiral Rostova," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "on behalf of the people of the Varish Dominion, we surrender. We request your assistance in forming a provisional government and bringing our former leaders to justice." The ultimatum had been answered not by a victim, but by the issuer. In the days that followed, the Alara system became the heart of a political transformation. The Varish Provisional Government, with Rostova's fleet acting as neutral observers, formally arrested Admiral Kalen and his loyalist officers. They were to be tried not by a Terran court, but by their own people under new laws. The institutional consequence was swift and absolute. On the Galactic public ledger, the new Varish government officially and permanently outlawed the ultimatum doctrine, citing it as a tool of authoritarian fear incompatible with civilized galactic society. The privileges associated with it were rescinded, and its historical applications were opened for review. Rostova stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching as the last of the loyalist ships was escorted away by its former comrades. The repair crews were making progress, the scent of ozone finally replaced by the clean, sterile smell of replaced circuitry. The lights on the blockade board had long since dimmed their angry red glow, a fading memory. On a public channel, a newsfeed confirmed the tally of the Varish government's vote to abolish their most infamous military policy. Outside the vast, silent mirror arrays of the drone lattice, their work now done cooled to a dull, unassuming pewter. Power, she thought, was not the ability to force an enemy to their knees. That was just violence. True power was the ability to hold up a mirror so clearly that your enemy had no choice but to see themselves, and in seeing, choose to stand up taller. A victory was not the silence of a battlefield, but the roar of a people finding their own voice. You do not win by breaking your enemy. You win when they find the strength to mend themselves. The greatest victory is the war that is never fought.